Hi, Alika. Nice to speak with you. Thank you for taking the chance to talk with me and spending the time to talk with me. And I just to get started, I wanted to ask you to introduce Every Day in Kaimuki to someone who's going into it completely blind. And I also would like to know what influenced you to tell this story.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Yeah, what influenced the story, and I guess if you didn't know what you're getting into, this film was born out of sort of a friendship that I had with the lead actor Naz Kawakami, who we've been friends for a few years now, and he's like, we're both really into movies, and I loved talking about movies with him, and we had talked about maybe doing something together. So when I found out that he was moving
Mm.
and preparing to move to New York, we kind of discussed this idea of like, what if we did this thing that kind of
Oh,
portrayed that, because that was something that I hadn't really seen depicted. And so we were both into that idea, and then because we both love movies so much, we wanted to fictionalize elements of it as well to make it a little more compelling in that way. So
nice. So when it comes to writing this story alongside Naz, I mean, I know that you guys both took part in the script. Um, were you pulling from a lot of personal experiences when it comes to like dramatizing that story?
yeah, certainly. There was sort of a loose foundation for to build off of some of what he was actually going through, or based on things that he was actually going through. And we actually used his real friend group, who was down,
Oh, okay.
friends to be yeah, like 90% of the actors in the movie are his actual friends. So we were just kind of building off of a natural dynamic that was already there.
Mhm.
This is a very exaggerated version of Naz. He's playing like a caricature of himself, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's like is and isn't him, which is like kind of a funny way to talk about the film. But uh sorry, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
No,
Or
that does. That does. That's really cool that you guys used his like his friends too, because it definitely felt like a really natural chemistry. So that makes a lot of sense now that I know that.
cool, yeah. And the lead, the Caden character, who comes to kind of not replace him but join him at the radio station,
Mhm.
he is actually my roommate.
Nice.
And but he had been friends with Naz for a long time, even before I was,
Mm.
before I knew either of them. They were friends. So like he uh he was a part of both of our lives in that way. So we kind of knew how to like write for his character, and explore some fun things through him.
Mhm. Yeah, so talk to me about the filming process for the film. It's clear that it was done during the pandemic. What kind of challenges were you up against when it comes to filming from that angle?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting just because you look at the pandemic, or the infection rates right now, and like in Hawaii right now, it's like still about 20%, which is
Mhm.
kind of crazy to think about where we were a year ago when we were shooting this, because the numbers were like hovering around 2%. So
Mm.
we could shoot it a lot more safely back then. And I think, like, if I guess I say that to say we couldn't have shot this now with the way that things are, we wouldn't have felt as comfortable, because it probably wouldn't have been as safe to shoot it.
Mm.
So yeah, it was really just because the numbers were relatively stable at the time. I think that more not as careful when we're shooting. Granted, we still, like, took all the necessary precautions, and made sure
Mhm.
we were shooting it as safely as possible. But people are wearing masks, and getting, I think, the actors used to delivering their lines in the masks was definitely like, an interesting thing.
Mhm.
Um, just, yeah, I mean, this film takes place during the pandemic, but it's not like about the pandemic. That's just like a backdrop. So that was important to me and Naz.
Yeah, and I mean, on a more positive note, I can tell you obviously love filming in Hawaii, And I'm curious about, filmmakers who turn their settings into characters of the film. What are some of your favorite things about filming in your home state?
Yeah, I mean, for me so far, my three prior short films were all set here, so it's kind of all I've ever known.
Mhm.
Uh, I think, Hawaii has been a backdrop in so many films, right, for like 100 years by, Hollywood and people, yeah, just sort of not from here telling stories with Hawaii as a backdrop. And I think one of the exciting things about this film was me and Naz, because we are both, have Native Hawaiian blood, uh, felt like it was sort of a responsibility to just present a different side of Hawaii, and it's still an authentic side, and the character just so happens to live a very urban life.
Mhm.
So we wanted to showcase that and be true to that. We don't feature beaches or sand or like surfing and all that kind of stuff, because that's just not the reality for a lot of people, probably most
Mhm.
people. And of course, a lot of people do love the beach and are amazing. We have a incredible lineage of Hawaiian surfers. I mean, surfing was born here, but that's not all of us. So just trying to showcase a broader perspective of what it means to live here.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I love seeing Hawaiian filmmakers take on the landscape, because I feel like it feels very authentic, as
Mm.
opposed to, somebody from the outside coming in and feeling kind of like they're exoticizing the place. So I really enjoyed that. So during the movie, there's this line where Nas says he talks about belonging and never feeling like he's belonged anywhere. And there's a few moments in the film that focus on his identity. Um, and him being Hawaiian is obviously such a big part of his identity. Can you talk a little bit about that scene and the decision to include it into the film?
Yeah, I mean, that conversation I think is such a fusion of myself and Naz, because we are of the same sort of genetic makeup. And
Mm.
I think he, like I, have also struggled with being Hawaiian and not feeling Hawaiian enough, and what is Hawaiian enough. And we're also both Japanese and not maybe feeling Japanese enough as well. So uh yeah, I think that's informed a lot of my work so far, has been sort of examining identity and the way that shapes us.
Mhm.
And then I think for the character in the movie, uh that contributes to this feeling of like not really feeling like he belongs anywhere. um which I think a lot of people who are more like biracial or triracial, or have a more mixed up uh ethnic background probably experience. So I think that's relatable for a lot of people.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And I think it's quite interesting, that Naz kind of says that he doesn't romanticize New York initially before getting there. But then when he does get there, it's sort of like this really quiet, idyllic life that is a bit of a romanticization of New York. I'm curious why you chose New York as his destination. I mean, I understand that the actor is actually moving there, but was there a focus on that place because it's sort of a place that young people go to go find themselves, or was there ever consideration maybe we choose a different spot?
uh it was a consideration to an extent. Yeah, I think what's not so much depicted in the movie is that Nas in real life has shaped a lot of his musical tastes from these New York bands. And we kind of allude to that in the beginning as he talks about Richard Hell and the Voidoids, and CBGB, which is like a
Mm.
very, prominent New York club, or, venue. So yeah, like in it had this idea of what New York, and this like, because he's loved so many artists from there, he wanted to go there. But in the movie, yeah, I mean, it's funny because it's like, yes, it is sort of a more idyllic situation to an extent, but at the end of the movie, like, he's just in a room with his cat, and he could have been anywhere for that. Like, he's still feeling you know, he doesn't really know if he made the right decision or not. And but he knows he's in a different place, and we don't know if that's better or worse, but it's different. And you know, I think that's meaningful. He did it. He did the thing, and it's really hard to do what he did.
Yeah, I mean, his friends were taking bets on him, and it was a very relatable moment because I feel like my own life, like I've had experience like that where it's like, okay, I'm gonna move, I just need to get somewhere new, and you don't know what's ahead of you. I feel like the portrayal of his reaction afterwards and during is very authentic in a way, so I like that about it.
Cool, yeah, and it's been cool to just get some of the early feedback from other people who have, you know, our producer moved, Jesse Odio moved from Costa Rica to the States. My manager, Tanya, moved from South Africa to the States. Like I think a lot of people who've had to make those types of decisions and have left, you know, a very comfortable situation, you know what that's like and how hard it is to uproot your world.
Yeah, for sure. So my final question centers a little bit more generally around API films and the landscape of Asian American Pacific Islander films. Obviously, we've seen a lot of stories about our identity and our place in America, but I'm wondering if there's a specific story that you want to see from like the group of filmmakers, the community of filmmakers that you haven't seen yet.
That's a really good question. I mean, I think it can only speak for myself and what we've been doing. And even like this film is kind of a good example because it
Mhm.
is predominantly Asian and Hawaiian faces, but like we never, you know, we in the writing of it, we weren't like, we didn't have a quota of like, we need to like have, you know, this many Chinese and Japanese and Korean and Hawaiian people. Like this is just kind of our reality. And I think you know, being Asian and Hapa and mixed in Hawaii is so endemic to our everyday that we don't even think about it. And it's not really like a topic of conversation, you know what I mean? So like, it just kind of is. And that's what like I wanted to showcase in terms of the representation, because I think, you know, it can be quite powerful to not have to, you know, hit people over the head with the fact that this is like a Japanese thing or a specifically Korean or Hawaiian thing. It's just a human thing, but we all happen to be, you know, API as well. So
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I totally get that. And I really liked your film. I really want to say it was a very sort of quiet film that I felt like I could like dig into and enjoy. And again, obviously the connections to my personal life, I felt very seen in some of those moments. Like I definitely had friends questioning, like, are you really gonna leave? Or are you just gonna stay where you're comfortable? So I appreciate the film and I appreciate you for taking the time to speak with me.
oh, thank you so much. This was really a pleasure to talk with you and would be happy to talk again anytime.